Over the years, we've often heard this accusation hurled that someone is stuck in a September 10th mindset, meaning that somehow they haven't learned the lessons of September 11th. And my sense is that no one who lived through the horrors of September 11th could ever again know the luxury of a September 10th mindset. What worries me more is the fear that some individuals become stuck in a September 12th mindset. And by that I mean that sense of fear that we all had, waiting for the next attack, where we made decisions based on fear, where we began to think perhaps that the Constitution and the system of checks and balances and protection of civil liberties was really just a luxury of peace and one that we could no longer afford. And I worry if we haven't learned, and I think the lessons that most Americans have learned since September 12th, about the ways in which the Constitution is a source of our strength. That we've been reminded that it was a document not created by a bunch of fuzzy-headed liberals, but by a group of individuals who had just fought a war and who were looking for ways to make sure that this nascent nation, this experiment, could survive. On detainee issues, for example, and venues for prosecuting or dealing with suspected terrorists, from a counterterrorism perspective, the criminal courts have been far more effective at bringing suspected terrorists to justice than the military commissions have. The record speaks for itself. There have been hundreds of successful trials in criminal courts of suspected terrorists. We have hundreds of terrorists who are sitting in U.S. prisons today, and we've had no successful military commissions. We've had 3 people go through the system. At least 2 of them are already now out walking the streets again. So from a counterterrorism perspective, the choice seems clear. When we put terrorists in a military commission with a jury of their peers, which turns out to be military officers, we send the wrong message. We reinforce the terrorist narrative and we undermine our narrative, which ought to be that these are really criminal thugs. Staying true to our values reinforces our narrative and allows us to compete effectively with the terrorist narrative. The terrorists are spinning a story that has the potential to be very appealing to young people. It is the story of a glorious religious jihad against a corrupt and hypocritical West that's at war against Islam. And so we need to make sure that the policies and the statements, the things we say and the things we do don't reinforce that narrative, but in fact present a more accurate narrative of an America that is indeed welcoming, that is accepting, that is true to its values, and stands up for what it believes in. Before you can disown something, you have to own it. And it's not clear to me that Americans really own yet the mistakes of the past, and that unless we really understand what those were, we won't have really learned the lessons going forward. What we have to recognize is that there are costs involved. We have to do a cost-benefit analysis. There are costs involved in holding on to all of these people, innocent and guilty, at Guantanamo. And our generals have spoken very eloquently about the costs that they see on the battlefield in terms of the recruitment that terrorists are able to do when we are perceived as acting in ways that are unjust and unfair. I'm actually very hopeful because I think we are finally seeing our policymakers speak to the American public as adults who understand the level of risks. When President Obama was quoted in Bob Woodward's book recently as saying that this country could absorb another terrorist attack, he was saying something that Americans know intuitively, which is they are working as hard as they possibly can in government to prevent another attack. There can be no 100% guarantee. And the important thing to remember is that if there is another attack, we will survive it. We will go on. And having that sense of resilience is incredibly important, and actually is a powerful deterrent against another attack. I think at the outset we have to stop talking in terms of balancing national security and civil liberties. I think that construct, which we've used for so many years, is really misleading. It implies that these are mutually exclusive objectives on opposite sides of a scale, and that if you just take away from one, you'll increase the other. And so if we have a little less civil liberties, we'll be somehow safer. And if we have more civil liberties, we'll be less safe. When in fact, I firmly believe, having worked counterterrorism issues for over 2 decades now, that these are very much mutually reinforcing. That obviously security is an important way of safeguarding our civil liberties, but preserving our civil liberties is also a very important element of our national security. Again, it goes to undermining the terrorist narrative and therefore making it harder for them to recruit and to find support in communities. So from that standpoint, it's very important. We understand that one of the most effective ways in which we're going to defeat the terrorist threat inside the United States, to the extent that we've got it, is working closely with communities in which those threats, that threat might emerge. And that requires a mutual relationship of trust. So those sorts of things that we've learned community policing over the years are very real examples of the ways in which our system of checks and balances and our protection of civil liberties reinforces our national security.